Our next speaker is Professor Nir Grinberg. Is Nir here? I don't see. Where is Nir? Okay. From the Department of Software and Information System at Ben-Gurion University. Nir will talk about super sharers of fake sharers of fake news on X.
Thank you.
You should use this one.
This one. Okay, better.
There are a lot of noise.
Hi everyone. Good morning. I see a lot of people standing there. So there are seats over there. If you'd like to move. Thank you very much for having me. As Irad said, I'm faculty at the Computer Science and Information Science department at Ben-Gurion University. My lab is called the Socially Embedded Lab, where the vision is to reimagine social in the digital age, both building like algorithms that can protect us better and seeing people's behavior online to inform better social theory out of it. If I use the first person pronoun too much, please stop me and remind me that these wonderful people are all doing the work. In particular, today's paper that I'm presenting was led by Sahar Baribi. It's also important to me to mention that we don't just do fake news or misinformation. We're active in other areas where we're trying to use LLMs and machine learning to harness LLMs and machine learning in order to provide all sorts of social benefit. For example, predicting unemployment based on social media, examining bias in AI. We're active in the legal tech area. But really, today's work is about this paper that I'm sorry, Rod, for making you break your teeth for saying the title. It's Super Shares of Fake News on Twitter. It was published at Science last year. And as I said, this is work that my student led. So the point I'd like to start is to go back to 2016 and really the surprise election of Donald Trump, where all of us all of a sudden woke up to seeing something a lot of us did not expect. And it only took the media one day, you see this was published in November 9th, to find who to blame, right? Like social media and filter bubbles were caused the election of Trump, and that's why none of us saw it, okay? Of course, since 2016, we learned a lot about the topic, but I think the fundamental question, the big question that's still over this entire research area is, does it matter, right? So to begin unpacking whether it matters, I put this on a scale. On the one side, I put all the evidence that says yes, and Irad cited beautifully a lot of these sources. So definitely, if you look at mainstream media, fake news matters. If you look at the World Economic Forum, that's the #1 threat for 23-25. You look at academic research, you see fake news and misinformation spread faster, deeper, wider than anything else. You look at the disproportionate amount of bots acting, working in this space, et cetera, et cetera. On the no side, there's also evidence that it does not affect the opinions of ordinary citizens. So Alcat and Ganskow in 2017 showed evidence that very little change in public opinion occurred for the average voter, and Bale et al. Looked at the interaction of voters with foreign influence accounts, and in their paper they say Russian trolls might have failed to sow discord because they mostly interacted with those who were already highly polarized. So not changing the core measures of political opinions, etc. And Edie has similar results showing similar effects on Facebook. In between, there's both Guess et al. And our work from 2019 that shows somewhat of a mixed result there's a lot of this content on social media, a lot of misinformation circulating online, but really very few people get it. So the starting point for the current work was trying to fill that void where we're mostly been looking either at the average person consuming misinformation or the extreme, but not in organic settings. So we're trying to fill the void of looking at people who are interested in fake news and get it organically. Moreover, we had other reasons. So one of them, to be honest, was curiosity. So the point we stopped at our 2019 science paper was here. Basically, the number one finding there was that if you look at the population, and there we had a panel of 16,000 registered Americans, if you look at the population, what you see is that exposure to misinformation is highly, highly concentrated. Only 1% of people get 80% of exposure to misinformation or fake news. And the situation is even more concentrated when you look at sharing. In our sample of 16,000 people, only 16 accounts, that's like 1/6, 16 people were responsible for 80% of the volume of misinformation. So in this follow-up work, we wanted to know who are these people? Who are these super sharers who share so much misinformation? And we wanted to know that because that has a huge impact on the ecosystem. We thought that's important to understand because it gives us a fuller understanding of the entire landscape, and because it's important in order for us to deliver better interventions. So in terms of research questions, we had 3 research questions. The first one is, are super sharers important? Who are they? And the last one is kind of, how do they do that? How do they evade the detection of the platforms or the platform? So this would not be complete without a little detour. I would not be a computer scientist if I didn't tell you something about methodology. So basically, the way we approach this is we constructed a massive panel of nearly 2 million registered Americans and matched those accounts to voter registration records in the US. So basically, for every person, we have both their registration record, their eligibility to vote and information about them as voters, and we have their activity online on Twitter. And we follow them over time. We do this matching very conservatively, so we only match people if they're unique in both sides, in both data sets. And since I have only 4 minutes left, I'll skip the rest of the methodology and just tell you what we found. So the first finding, even before we get to the research questions, is basically at the top panel. What you see is the amount of misinformation that's flowing to people every day during the 2020 elections in the US. Okay, so you can see that on an average day, about 5 to 7% of the content that people get in politics is coming from fake news sources. And the blue bar shows you that 80% of that total is coming from super shares, from this small portion of the population. Now, in contrast to the 2016 election, what you see in the 2020 election is a sharp increase after the election. And that surprised us, so we investigated it further. And what we found is that that's a post-election denial, right? So the 2020 elections in the US were contested. One side did not really like the result of the election, and there was a lot of misinformation coming out as a result of it. At the bottom, what you can see is that super shares, like the 2016 election, are a tiny percent, 0.3% of the population. That's like 3 people out of 1,000 that they're still accountable for 80% of the content. Okay, so getting to our research question, so are they important? So we looked at a bunch of measures, and what we found is that across the board, supershares are really, really important. They reach 5% of the population. They're more influential in their network positioning. They get more engagement. It's not that they're shouting into the void and no one's listening. They find like an engaging audience. So the short version of this, you can read the paper, but the short version of this is that supershares are important. Who are they? So the theory tells us, it gives us two profiles. One is the alt-right activist. The other one is an older adult who does not discern between like truth and falsehoods. The short answer is that both are wrong. The result surprised us. What we found is that supershares tend to be disproportionately women, older women, conservative women, and some racial disparities, but relatively small. Don't get me wrong, this is not just older women, but we do see a statistically significant difference. How they do it, for the sake of time, I'm not going to tell you everything we ruled out, but the bottom line is what we see is that they're basically doing this by persistently sitting there an hour a day and retweeting. Okay, so not fancy automation, not sophisticated auto posting, not using bots, just sitting there dedicated to a cause. So to wrap up, this paper really exposes a vulnerability for low-tech manipulations. We see that supershares have substantial reach, which gives us hope for potential interventions. I think this research really shows how a small, dedicated group of individuals with a focus on a cause can really make an impact. There's a famous quote by Margaret Meadow that says, "Never doubt the potential of a small group of people to achieve a cause. In fact, that's the only thing that ever has." So with that, I will leave you. Thank you very much.